What I paint is my life. It's a journey of my life. And it's a journey of the people that I meet and the people that I love. I'm looking for moments in my life that I can reflect when I'm in that space. I'm an ordinary human being. I'm an ordinary country boy who just had a dream and had a love for creativity.
Dreams and creativity would propel that simple country boy to the very top of the American art world.
I'm a small town boy from Quincy, Florida. I was raised by my grandmother from 11 months old. The first time I picked up a pencil or anything, I've always loved to draw. My grandmother bought me a paint by number set when I was about 5 years old. And it was 2 pictures of Christ. I did the little numbers, drove me crazy. The second one I freehand myself. And I guess that was my journey to becoming an American artist, was my grandmother actually sparked it in me.
Dean Mitchell's talent has been with him from childhood. Dean was a born artist. He was not a trained artist. He was a born artist because it was in there. It was in him from childhood.
I've always just loved it. I don't know why. It's always been a comfort for me too, in some ways or another. It's always comforted me. It's been more than drawing to me. It's sort of been, it has been in some ways a friend.
His talent is very personal. It has come to a certain extent from training. But more than that, I think his talent has emanated from his own experience, his own working out of the process. And I think every stroke that he puts on a painting comes from something within him.
The Columbus College of Art and Design opened up a new frontier for Dean. Not sure if he could compare to the other students, he nearly dropped out.
I caught the bus from Quincy, Florida to Columbus, Ohio, which was a good 18, 22 hours, something like that. And when I got back home for Christmas, my grandmother called my mother, and she said, "Hazel, I don't know what they're doing at that art school, but that boy can't go back. He done lost 40 pounds. He is thin as a rail." She said, "I don't know nothing about this art, but that's just too much." And so I got on the phone with her, and she said, "You're going to have to go back. I can't take care of you the rest of your life. You got to figure out what you want to do." And I got back on that Greyhound bus, and I went back to that school. And I said, "Dean, you're either going to put all of yourself in this or you're not." I said, "And if you don't, it's not going to work." I said, "It's very competitive. It's a world that I didn't know much about. But because I loved it so, I just said, I'm going to give it my all." And that's what I did. I just worked at it.
Maybe being an African American from the South would have daunted others, but Dean decided to listen to his mother.
When I first started really drawing and painting and taking it very, very seriously, my mother said, "You will never," even my mother's sister said, "Hazel, that boy ain't never gonna make a living. He's gonna be wind up back home. You're gonna take the boy the rest of his life because." And she said, "Black people," my auntie said, "Black people don't really buy pictures. They don't pay that kind of money for pictures, and that's, and my cousin, they're all saying, that's white people stuff, black people, And it's funny because it has been a difficult road. I realized that from researching a lot of the artists, I found out about the National Academy of Design, I found out about the American Watercolor Society. going to art school, I found out about a lot of different things that they held exhibitions in New York, competitions, and that's really how I got known. Because I was poor and I didn't have some rich patron who took me under their wing, I started competing in mainstream art shows. I would have art shows, sometimes within the core of the black community. I wouldn't sell anything. I wouldn't sell anything. But then I would go over into more of a mainstream, what we call white America or mainstream. I found that I could sell my work more. But as I became known, then I started picking up other people who were wealthier African Americans who would see my work and would purchase it. You know, and I kept going, God, my mother's right, this is really difficult. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But on the other hand, I am the kind of man that I do like a challenge, I must admit. I do like a challenge.
The challenge of controlling watercolor would lead Dean to discover his artistic destiny.
I mean, I dabbled around a little bit, pretty much in high school at watercolors. But you know, you hear all these mystery tales about how difficult it is. So I had a little bit of a fear of it. But I ended up taking a couple of classes and I just kind of fell in love with it. And also there was a student at the Columbus College of Art and Design that I ran into that was really exceptional at watercolors. And I saw his. I thought, that's watercolor? He said, yeah. I said, oh man, I didn't know you could do so many different things with watercolor. So I went to the library, I checked out every book I could possibly check out on watercolor. And I experimented and experimented, and I just fell in love with it.
He has transcended the formulaic academic teaching that every line has to be right, everything has to be just right. And in the free application of watercolor, he somehow manages to manipulate that medium that it suddenly and gradually becomes something that you can recognize. It becomes a dress or a garment or a face or whatever. Because, you know, with watercolor, you can't scratch it off. You can't redo the painting as you can with oil. What you put down is what you're stuck with. And so it's not a question of making a decision about which way to go. It's a question of doing it right the first time.
But if Mitchell feels pressure to do it right the first time, you wouldn't guess it.
And with watercolor, you really have to let go and don't worry about making a mistake. And sometimes I'll start at an easel working on something, and the next thing I'm standing over top of it and I'm dropping water and paint and pushing it around. It's just fun. It's fun. I love it.
When Dean is painting, the creative process is going on almost spontaneously from within. Where are you going to place your first stroke of color? How are you going to manipulate this various interpretation? And even watching some of his work on one of the DVDs or on the video, you just see him applying color, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem to make sense. It's just color going on. But suddenly it turns into an arm, or it turns into a part of the building, or a feature of the face, because of the way that he manipulates his watercolor.
I do sketches and drawings, and I use photos occasionally, but for the most part I use sketches. I like sketches more. And sometimes I'll do a quick value study just to kind of get a kind of an abstraction of what I want to do. But I never get too detailed because it kind of kills the exploring part of what I'm going to do, because sometimes I don't know exactly how it's going to come out. I kind of have an idea, but I like the unpredictability of that. It will change as it's evolving, as I'm moving the paint around. It might change. Sometimes I'll start from light to dark. That's a traditional way of working watercolor. Sometimes I won't start that way at all. I'll start with a very dark. Sometimes I am somewhat a little insecure at times. And then there are other times I go into the studio and I'm just feeling very bold and free, and that's when the fun happens. When I'm really relaxed, that's when the fun happens. I'm not trying to create a product. I'm just trying to have fun, and hopefully people will see the joy in what I've done in the brushwork, the freedom and the joy of what it took to do that. That's what I'm after, that kind of thing.
I think with every brush stroke, he knows what he's doing and he knows what he's going for. And that ability makes him a master.
I see detail in something very last. That's the last thing I look at is detail in anything. I'm usually looking at shapes, movement, edges, stuff like that. I don't know why. I've always had that feel for that. I have no idea where that comes from. But I recognize things that are real and pure and that have weathered a sense of time, and people have used those objects in some ways and then discarded them. And I suppose this too is why I like art that is done by what they call the outsider artists. They use things that have been discarded and they put them together. In a sense, I reflect that back as well, only it's on canvas.
The finest art speaks to you on several levels. So when you stand in front of a Dean Mitchell picture, if it happens to be a portrait of somebody, you have to stop and study the portrait and see why he painted it the way he did. Who is the person that is in this picture? Why did he choose this subject? You get the sense that he chose some of the individuals because there was so much character in them.
I have noticed that I do paint a lot of elderly people. I have noticed that. And I'm pretty sure that probably comes from being raised by my grandmother and my grandma Seeley. And I'm not afraid of people if they're sick and ill or anything like that. In fact, I want to paint them and talk to them and ask them questions and how they feel, because I'm trying to feel out this place that they're at and how it feels to be at this stage in their lives. So I'm searching for something that's kind of in some ways intangible, but is real when you're confronted with it. And so that's what I'm after. I'm after those real subtle parts of life that people tend to take for granted, and I want to sort of get people to stop and slow down and look at that, how wonderful that moment could be. Because sometimes we're living life so fast, we forget how rich it is until we get to a certain age, and then we start reflecting on our memories, and it's those simple, wonderful things that we start to think about that brings a lot of joy to us.
He has found a specific way of dealing with his art, and he's sticking to it. He's staying with it. And I think that's important with an artist of his sort.
I never paint for market. That's kind of a kiss of death for me, and I don't take commissions either. I just don't like them. I have to be inspired in some way to paint something, because for me, if I'm going to look at something and paint it, I have to have some kind of connection to it. It's there because there's a certain energy that I'm looking for. There's a certain human touch or human quality or a sense of creation about it that's very interesting. I mean, I have a great love for trees, but I like trees in the winter. I like trees in the winter because it's kind of like drawing a nude figure. Trees, you can see the beautiful limbs the way all the different directions they go in, and they just dance across the sky. It's a beautiful thing. A tree is a beautiful thing if you really look at it. It's just, trees are exquisite things. I love them. I love trees. So.
you can't quite tell if a Dean Mitchell painting was painted, 2 years ago or maybe 10 years ago. But you can if you follow the sense of how the characters have changed, how the individuals have changed, how he's matured in his interpretation of these subjects. You can see a gradual change and an evolution, but it's very subtle.
It's evolved. I'm always evolving. Like the paintings that I have here are all watercolors, just one side of me. But if you look at them, they're all different kinds of approaches. And on purpose, I like to experiment. There is a sense of freedom now in how I approach my work. Initially, I used to put a lot of drawing down for things. I don't do as much so now. It's kind of like learning how to dance. As you're learning how to dance, I don't know if you've ever tried to do any kind of salsa or any kind of thing like that, or couple dancing. Pretty soon, you don't need to look down. You don't need to try to count to yourself how many. And that's how it is when you do art. The more you do it, it becomes almost like a dance. It's like sometimes when I go to the studio, I know my rhythm is not there, and other days I go, and everything is just falling. It's like a nice dance. And when it works together, it's a beautiful thing to have a brush in your hand that's loaded with paint, and you're letting your arms just move with it. It's a piece of heaven. It is. It is. Enjoy. I don't even know how long it takes me to do a particular work because I work on 15, 20 things at a time. I would say, some paintings could take me 3-4 hours, even if it's something big. Some could take a couple of weeks. Not that I'm working on it continuously, mind you. And some could take me, I did a painting called Grandma's Clothesline, which I don't have in here when I was 18. It probably took me less than an hour. But it was from life. It was just some clothes hanging on a clothesline, but it was very, very quick and brief. So some things are very direct and very quick, and other things are, sometimes you can labor with things, and that's when I know I killed something. I know when I killed something. Sometimes I can tell right away. Now, what's really interesting now is that I can almost tell now if something's going to work from the first stroke that I put down. I can tell if it's going to move, if it's going to work. I couldn't do that before. Sometimes I would work on something and go, and I said, I'm going to make this work. And it just wouldn't work. And now when I start off, I go, that ain't going to work. Start over. I'll start over in a minute. It doesn't mean anything to me to start over. Like I've taught classes and students are so, I said, why are you so, just let it go. You got more, did you have more paper over there? Did you have plenty of stuff over there? Just let it go. Let it go. That's the freedom of it. And I think that's how life should be in some ways too. You have to let it go sometimes to enjoy it. You ever been around a person that's uptight all the time? It ain't working. And art's the same way. If you're so nervous and uptight, it ain't gonna happen. Creativity happens when you're relaxed and you're having, just letting go. Letting go. I'm kind of like a chef. It's a dab of this and a dab of that and a dab of that. So I've had people say, well, what color is that? Well, I work off of a meat tray. And the paint is just flowing every which direction. And I'll dab a little bit of that and put a color down. And they'll say, well, what color is that? I said, well, it's a little dab of that, a little dab of that. and depending on what temperature I want to change the color to, I may drop another color in there immediately while it's still wet. And so it's hard to teach that. It's more of a reaction rather than, it's not just a pure technique. It's a reaction to what's going on in the moment. And that moment can change at the flash of a second what I will grab on the next stroke. And so I cannot teach that. You can see it, you can watch me, but it's hard to teach that because It's me and the surface and what's going on mentally, spiritually. It's that abstract, untangible moment that you cannot teach. It has to be done with a love for something and a reaction to what you're doing at the moment. It is unteachable. That is not teachable. It's just not. I don't know how to explain that, but it isn't. It's not teachable. I think that artists are born. They're born. But there is a combination. I think that there are some people who are born, they're just driven to create. They are just driven. They have to. It's like, I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't paint. I'm just driven. I've always been that way. I don't know why. Yeah, can you make an artist in some ways? You can make a technician. But to make an artist, I don't know. I was born in 1957. I was, about 5 or 6 years old in the full throttle of the civil rights movement. And I remember watching a lot of things about the racial struggles in American culture. And I've always, deep down in my soul, wanted to do something about that with my art.
When we talk about artists, and we talk about African American artists, it's always important with any artist to define them, first of all, for what they are. He is an artist. He is an artist. It's not fair to say that this artist is a woman artist, or this artist is a male artist, or this artist is a Caucasian, or he's Russian. You don't want to do that. They are first and foremost an artist.
I am an African American. That's very true. But I am an artist first. I have always been an artist first. That does not mean that I do not love who I am and where I came from and how I was raised. And I recognize some of the cultural biases. I recognize racism. I grew up during those times. But at the same time, to move a nation forward, you have to, in some ways, take yourself out of it and look to a higher spiritual playing field if you're going to move people with anything. This is why I think Dr. King was so great, was that he looked at brotherhood, mankind, and that's how I am as a painter. Yes, most of my paintings are of African Americans, and perhaps that is because I am African American. And I have to admit that I have been very conscientious of the lack of our images in museums. And I feel like this is something that perhaps I can change and give people a window into a world. For whatever reason they feared, there is no fear, because we are all basically the same.
And some of his most recent work is at the Canton Museum of Art, now celebrating its 75th anniversary year, in Mitchell's Space, People, and Places solo exhibition.
We want to elevate and constantly make our community more and more aware of the great diversity of art.
Dean Mitchell is the most important living Black American artist in the United States.
What he has created for us is absolutely stunning, and we're just thrilled with the show.
Dean is probably one of the greatest living watercolor artists of African American heritage, and his works are so wonderful.
It's huge for an African American artist to show a large body of work in a museum, because we so rarely get asked and we so rarely get the sponsorship. So rest assured that Dean Mitchell is certainly appreciative of the Canton Museum of Art having a solo exhibition of my work. And so people can see a body of it and can feel the depth and breadth of it. And to be able to sit here and talk about the work and what it means to be an artist, and also to inspire the next generation of anybody who comes through, but particularly young African American artists who may not feel that they're wanted or feel like there is a place for them. And there is a place. I am here as proof of that. So Space, People, and Places is about a moment in time. And if you look at the work, there's a lot of doorways and this kind of thing. I like work that you can look at it here, but there's also another place in which you can travel inside the work, into a space. So I kind of like that. I want people to feel a part of what they're looking at. Although it's two-dimensional, I want them to feel they can walk into that world and see it, and be there.
And when you look at his work, you could sense that he's captured that moment in time. And you could feel the emotion. You could see it, and you kind of get engulfed into the paintings.
If I can do anything but load that paint with love, so that when people walk in there, that they have a sense of harmony and a sense of peace about what they're looking at and why I created it, then yes. If I can bring a little peace to someone's life through what I do and love, absolutely, absolutely.